In this video, we're going to continue to build out our athlete wellness trend report by calculating our weekly averages and also having these charts that will switch from a bar to a line chart depending on your selection. These are going to be really powerful tools that you can use to keep track of your athlete wellness or other KPIs over time. So let's get after it. Okay, so in the last video, we got as far as creating the beginnings of our athlete wellness trend report. We created our data set, as well as we created a filter formula to actually pull out the data based on the selections that we've made, including the athlete name and the week that we've selected. Now in this video, what we want to do is actually do some calculations based on that data that we've pulled out, as well as display it in a graph. Just a reminder to catch up to where we are now. If you go back and watch the last video on the athlete wellness trend report, which I will link up at the top, you will be able to get to where we are now and then be able to continue along with this video. And finally, if you are finding any value in these videos, please like and subscribe to the channel because that really helps me out and helps me grow. So without further ado, let's get on with this project. So the first part that we're going to work through is calculating an average based on the week and the athlete. And that's going to be an interesting metric that just allows us to see on average where that athlete falls with their wellness trend. And if they are high, then they might be doing well. If they're low, they might not be doing so well. And it's just an option for us to look at. So from the last video, we used this filter formula, which matches based on the week as well as the athlete name to pull out all of that data. So the cool thing now is all we actually have to do is take that filter formula and stick it inside of an average formula. So if I take this filter formula and I'm just going to control copy this, and inside of this cell here where I want the average, I'm going to type equals average. Open that up and I will paste that filter formula. And as a reminder, what the filter formula does is indexes the total if the week matches the week that we've selected and the athlete matches the athlete that's been selected. And when I hit OK, it's going to give me my value of 12.57142, etc., etc. I'm just going to center this and put it in the middle using the bars up here. And if I change my week, you can see that average changes, and that's how that looks. And if I were to take the athlete out, you can see that gives me an error value. Okay, so a couple of things that we want to do here. I don't know about you, but I don't really want this value to have all of these decimal places. So what I'm going to do is wrap this average formula in a function called mround. And what mround does is it actually takes a value and you can signify how many decimals you want to actually round that value to. So what I'm going to do is round it to the nearest 0.5. So in front of this average, I'm going to type mround, open that up, and it's going to ask me for two things. The first being the value, and we already have that being calculated through our average formula. And then I'll go to the end of this formula and hit a comma. And now it's going to ask me what factor I want to round it to. And for me, I want to round it to 0.5. And when I close that off and hit enter, you can see that now our value is a nice whole number, or well, a nice decimal number of 0.5. And if I were to change this, you can see that when we have a week where the average is 10, then it rounds it to that number right there. Okay, so that's one way that you can start to clean up your values. And then the next way is what we're going to do is add an if error formula at the front. So I'm going to wrap this in an if error, go to the very end, hit comma, and if it is an error, I'm just going to do double quotations and wrap that up. So now if I run into a situation where there are no values, it's just going to show as blank and it's not going to give me an ugly error formula. But if I bring my athlete back, you can see that the formula comes back. Okay, so all we've done is wrapped that average formula in an mround to round it off, and then an if error to make sure that if there is an error, that it just gives me a blank cell instead of an ugly error formula. So if we were printing this out and handing it to coaches, we wouldn't have any ugly errors in our data. Now, one quick thing to note is because we've used rand between to kind of create our values, it's always going to keep the average around sort of the middle. So we've done it on a scale of 1 to 5, and if you can see, there's not a lot of variance in the values that it actually creates that way. So that's why as we go through, you can see that a lot of the sort of averages are right around that 12.5, 13 mark, because that's sort of the halfway total of what our total would be of 20. Okay, so that's just a quick thing to note if you're wondering why all the values look a little bit funky. Now, number 2, what we can do now is if I just change this a little bit, make it a little bit bigger maybe, I can add a color code to this. So I'm going to add a format to it. So if I click on there and go to format and hit a conditional format, what I can do is go to a color scale, and there's a lot of different scales here, and we might want one that the max value is red, or if we can switch this around, so we can make our max value green, and then middle value, and then our lower value is red. So this is a common type of scale that's often used. But what you can do through this is if I choose a number, I can set this so anything higher than, let's say, 16, maybe for that athlete, would be considered green. And then anything lower than, let's say, I don't know, 8 might be sort of a red color. And then as a number standpoint, maybe we want that 10 value or 12 value to be sort of that middle value. So I'm just setting my own scale so that things aren't colored based on each other. They're colored based on the scale that I've already laid out. So that's an easy way if you want to highlight out certain values. So maybe in your wellness trend, anything over 16 is like good to go for that day. So you want to make sure that that's set as green, regardless of what some of the other values in your series are doing. So I'm just going to leave that like that. And you can see as we change it, it's scaled based on what we've selected those values to be. Okay, so now the last piece of the puzzle is we want to actually create the chart in here that shows us our values. So similarly to what we did here, we can take this filter formula and just kind of graph that. So what I'm going to do is copy this one more time, Control C, and I'm going to use a formula called sparkline. So equals sparkline. Open that up, and I'll paste that filter formula back in minus the actual equal sign that came with it. And then for sparklines, that's going to be our values. Now we can start to add our options. Okay, so what I want to do for some of our options are, after I put that comma, I can open a squiggly bracket and start to type in our options. And for sparklines, options are typically typed as quotations and words. So the first thing we're going to do is go quotation chart type and quotation, and then comma. We want to make a column chart. So another quotation column, COLUMN, quotation, and then you want, I forget what that symbol's called. And then you want a semicolon, okay? And we're going to add our next kind of values. We know what the max and the min values of our actual scale are going to be, so I'm going to set those now. So the first one we're going to set is the y-axis minimum value. So we're going to go quotation y min, quotation, comma, and we're going to set that as 0. So we want the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, to be 0 at the bottom, and then semicolon again. And I'm going to set the y max, comma, as 20, because we know a maximum value in this scale is 20, and that should be enough kind of values for this. And I'm going to close off the squiggly bracket, then close off the normal bracket. And when I hit enter, what you're going to see now is our actual chart. Okay. And I've typed in something wrong here because I'm getting a line chart instead of a column chart. So there was a small error in my formula. So when I go back to look at it, what you can see is when I typed in chart type, I only had one T, so you actually need two T's in there, and that will give us our bar chart. Okay, so that's a chart type style column. Okay, so that's a column chart. Now, if you remember from the intro, what we want to have is the ability to actually switch between two different types of charts. Okay, so what I'm going to do is wrap this whole sparkline formula in an if statement. So what this is going to look like is I'm going to take this formula, go to the very beginning of it and go if, open that up, this cell here, so Q3, and I'm going to lock that in place with F4 because we don't want that to change. If that equals quotations bar, because that is what we're going to look for, then comma, the value if true is going to be display that sparkline bar graph the same way that we just did. Otherwise, I'm going to copy this whole sparkline formula, go to the end and hit comma, paste that in one more time, and this time instead of typing in that I want chart type column, I'm just going to delete that, and when I close this whole thing off, I should be able to switch between the two types of charts. So if I choose line, it gives me my line chart. If I choose bar, it gives me my bar chart. So that's just a quick way to sort of change around your visualization. And to walk you through what I did there one more time, what we're doing is an if formula. So if the cell where we're selecting bar or line equals bar, then I do want to display the sparkline bar chart. Okay, but if it doesn't, which is the next thing that we have to enter, then I just want to display a normal sparkline with the same parameters minus the fact that I want it to be a bar chart, I want it to be a line chart. Okay, and then when I hit enter, you can see now we're able to kind of do that all the way through. So that is how you create that athlete wellness report. There's a few key features in there that you might want to use in some of your own reports. If I wanted to, I could just create more data and then continue to add to this wellness report, and everything would work the same way because all of our references have been locked in where they need to be. So I hope that this helps you out. And if it does, again, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, that really helps me out. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you.